Whenever something works for you, no matter the channel, like make sure to go all in, double, triple, quadruple your spend while you can see that it's working, because it's not gonna work forever. It's just the life of marketing. We can't shut up. We tell each other this is working amazingly. People shift their budgets over to it. Then it works like an auction. Prices go up, competition gets harder and harder, and at some point it doesn't work anymore.
On today's episode of eCommentary, we are joined by Steffen Hedebrandt. Steffen is the CMO of Dreamdata, an attribution tool. So not only does Steffen have to figure out attribution for B2B marketers, he also has to figure out the attribution for his own attribution company. This is a fantastic episode that dives into mentality and mindset around attribution, how brands can look at modeling their marketing mix, and lots of great lessons in terms of getting very, very clear on your customer personas and then marketing to those. I'd urge you to sit back and relax. This one is a great episode to listen to. Welcome to eCommentary. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm looking forward to speaking with you, and hopefully there will be some learnings from the B2B world that translate well into the direct-to-consumer world as well.
I think there's a great opportunity, because as somebody who is working with attribution every single day and is then working on the marketing of that attribution product, you kind of get the best of both worlds. I have this leaning opinion at the moment that there is a little bit more openness and willing to understand longer attribution cycles from the world of B2B, which is really what I'm so keen to discuss with you today. And I guess I was wondering, because demand gen is getting so popular with B2B, and we can discuss that as well, what we're seeing on the flip side in D2C is there's still this friction towards attribution where people still assume that what they used to be able to do can still work in some form. Why do you think we're seeing that?
Good question. So I would definitely also speak with people who are not that data interested or not that attribution obsessed in B2B as well. So I think it's not only isolated to that, but I do, in general, I think within the last 10 years, the amount of data that has been available about how you sell has just, continuously been growing until that point of time where all this intelligent tracking prevention and stuff like that started to get introduced by Apple, and then GDPR came out a few years before that. So people have just been so used to everything just being so easy to track, so it's not really been a problem. I think it depends also what kind of product we're talking about. Is it a car? Then I would expect that to be a rather long buying cycle, or maybe it's just impulsive, I don't know. But in general, if you talk complex products, expensive product, then you're bound to have a longer journey where it takes longer to shape that decision, whereas then there's also very simple products where you actually I think you could argue that that brand argument shouldn't count as much, because it's something that you're making a decision upon right now. So there you need to be able to impact that decision right away with your ads or the marketing activities you do. But you're completely right, Andy, that like anything of bigger complexity or bigger amount of money you have to pay for it, you need to start shaping that journey a lot earlier than from when they're actively searching to buy X type of product.
Yeah, and it really feels like there have been, in maybe in both sides, there have been people and brands that have just not been able to overcome this, because we've recently seen with Meta, they've just brought back in the 28-day breakdowns in some accounts, which is their way of saying, like, we tried to set you on the right track, you couldn't go that way, but now we're going to provide you with this modeled or estimated 28-day attribution, just so that you can sleep a little better at night. But it's a band-aid, it's not a solution to the problem. It just seems that people haven't been able to adapt, whereas I don't know if it's just that they can't find a solution for them, or whether it's that there's just an unwillingness there. And when I compare that with, say, what you're doing with Dreamdata, it's very, very clear. I was researching the brand before we recorded, so I went onto your website and I was taken down the Dreamdata marketing rabbit hole. So I've been hit with touch points on multiple channels. I go onto LinkedIn and I see your brand advocates, and I'm like, whoa, these guys are absolutely everywhere. And it just shows that you have a very distinctive approach to your own marketing and how you're approaching the attribution of that marketing. Could you kind of run us through the rationale behind your marketing strategy?
Oh, yeah. It's something that has been organically developing for a long time, and it's not necessarily always cut out like as a textbook example, but I can try to drill into it. If you picture a funnel, even though I don't believe in funnels at all, because I don't think the world just behaves according to how you would like it to behave. But if we stay with that funnel scenario, I think there is people who are actively searching for, or like actively in market right now, trying to decide which product you should buy. This is for me an area where the marketing you do should be kind of always on, kind of trying to address how is somebody expressing an intent to buy a product like yours. So that, typically can be, through search ads on Bing and Google, typing in some kind of category, trying to buy that product. It can be review platforms, people reading up on products in your review category. It's typically also a sign that people are actively buying. And then for each industry, there's probably different places where they go to express this demand. So there's an always on section for the people who are in market right now that I would always advise anybody to start building from, because that's where you can capture some demand immediately and show that you're spending money that in a reasonable sense returns the money. But there's always also a limited amount of people searching for your product or product category right now. And that's where kind of the name you used earlier, which I think is being a little bit overpreached, but people call it demand generation. And the way I've personally translated that, or I've taken that, has been a game changer for us at Dream. That has definitely been once we decided upon an ideal customer profile, like actively deciding who is it that we're trying to sell to and who is it we are not trying to sell to. And it can sound easy on paper to make this decision, but when it comes to it, it's actually very hard to say no to selling to somebody who looks to be a little bit interested in your product, or who you could make the product work. You're not sure that they're going to be happy afterwards. But once we had kind of decided upon which exactly is that person and company that we're trying to sell to, then all the other exercises becomes a lot easier. I don't know if you've seen the TED Talk or the book of Seth Godin called Tribes.
No, I've not seen that one.
It's like 10 years old, or 15 years old now. It's really good. He basically talks about, there's all these kinds of tribes of people out there today. And the way I translate that is that if you think about where this tribe is and what it does, then you don't need, a Coca-Cola size ad budget to actually look very omnipresent. If you think about surfers, then there's probably a few like top 10 surf spots around the world. There's 10 magazines, there's 10 influencers, there's 10 events, there's 10 competitions, etc. And if you're just present at these places where the surfers go and look and surf, then you might look pretty big, but you're not actually spending a huge advertising budget because it's only focuses on this little niche. And for us, our definition has been, B2B marketers, or even more granular B2B marketers working in software as a service companies. And when you go to this granularity, then it's been a lot easier to decide upon what are the activities we should do to get in front of the right people who, in time when they have budget or change jobs, etc., actually can go out and buy an attribution tool, which not all companies need, or not all companies have budgets for, or is important for right now. So there's the in-market section of our ad spend, which is always on. And then there's a definition of who is it that we're trying to get to come to us when they need a product like that. And that's been extremely focused on B2B marketers. And as you said, they spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So obviously we have to be very present there as well. But it's also kind of what types of creative, what type of messaging are you coming up with? Are you sure that these pain points are relevant to them? It all comes down to you deciding upon what is your ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think it definitely does, because again, it's almost classic marketing. So you've got the research element, which is, doing your market research, finding out about your market, which a lot of people don't do. Then it's getting the segmentation down. So then you look at from your research, you look at your market segment, and then you look at, there's all these people who might buy the product, but which of these segments make the most sense to market to? And then once you've got that, then you start to work on messaging and positioning. But I think what a lot of people and a lot of brands don't do is they skip this stage of market research and market segmentation, and then they try to go to market with their product with very vanilla messaging because they're trying to please everybody. And I don't think that the platforms themselves have helped the brands by how powerful kind of open targeting is on certain platforms. People, if you speak to a lot of performance marketers right now, they're saying, well, we're running open targeting to maybe males would be a big segment for them, and then an age range, and that's it. And we're marketing to all males on Facebook with this. But then if you're going to do that and be successful, you have to deliver a message that kind of appeals to everybody but doesn't excite anybody. And I think that that's super, super dangerous. Whereas where I've seen the work that you guys have been doing, it is very kind of structured and it's very targeted. And also your team's contribution on LinkedIn, there's a lot of meme use. There's a lot of, really well written and well thought out pieces of content because you've committed to a segment. Yeah, I think if there's one thing that the internet doesn't need, it's more average content. Like, people don't care about average or like general content. You can't stick out on the internet if you're doing generic stuff. You need to have an opinion. You need to look distinct. For any given product, it's impossible to say anything unless you've decided upon who are we speaking to. So we're for B2B SaaS marketers, preferably from 100 to 2,000 employees or something like that. When you've decided upon that it's these kinds of people, then the pains are very typical. The technology services they're using are similar. The problems that they're facing are similar. Their bosses are equally idiots in certain aspects and stuff like that. So it's very easy to appeal to people because you've actively decided upon who are we speaking to. And I think it's better to think about, like, I need to make 5% of the market super happy rather than trying to make 80% of the market somewhat like me, because like nobody cares about those that are, just dull, indistinct in any way. Yeah, and I think like a classic example of somebody at the moment who's very, very popular, well, probably two of them. You could say you've got Jake Paul and you've got Andrew Tate. Like, both of them, to some people, would be the most obnoxious people on earth, very polarizing, and to some, they're absolutely idolized, and they're quite happy not being for everybody, but for their people, they are the absolute. They're speaking to every pain point and every answer. And I think that we see that a lot with brands, is that they're too scared to have an opinion or too scared to close a door on one part of the market because we might miss out on sales there. And it's almost like you get these very vanilla brands, and when advertising CPMs start to increase like they have recently, or we see issues with attribution whereby they can't get these 15-minute signals to tell them this is working or not working, they actually begin to struggle. And it's not because they lost the ability to attribute, it's because their brand doesn't actually stand for anything. And I think that's a really big issue. I'd love to ask a couple more questions about your marketing strategy, so that when you're compiling your list of pain points, or like the reason why are our customers buying, are you focusing on your absolute best customers, or are you focusing on the majority of your customers?
Yeah, I think we do speak to, within this very defined niche, we're trying to speak to somewhat generic pains. Because we have already narrowed the pool that much down, then we try to speak and communicate it in a way that focus on the issues that are present, or like pains for most. So that's kind of, do you know how much revenue your ad spend yields, or do you know which piece of content drives your revenue? Do you know how long it takes to get a B2B customer, and such things. So it's, when you have scoped the amount of people you speak to that much, then kind of the messaging do fit very well across most of them. But you're right, you could go even more granular and say, if you're 5,000 people B2B SaaS company in Sweden, then you have XYZ pain. We've not gotten to that stage yet, but and that is kind of the nice thing about B2B, is that you can actually have large enough deal sizes where it makes sense to go. If you're a B2B SaaS company with 5,000 people in Stockholm and have these XYZ problems, then our solution is the correct one. But you also need to have some advertising that is broader scope, where you can't do that kind of one-on-one case description.
And once you've established all of this and you started to run your marketing campaigns, I'm really curious, as the CMO of an attribution company, what KPIs are you looking at?
Yeah.
I think people will be keen to hear this one.
So my main KPI, like in day to day, is making sure that the salespeople have enough demand to work on. And for us, that's expressed in, we call them marketing qualified leads, MQLs. Which is kind of the leading metrics. That's demo calls that are booked, or free signups to our product. But we actually then have one more stage, which we call sales accepted leads, which means MQLs that fits our definition of an ideal customer profile. So those two metrics is my main focus, because that means that the salespeople have enough qualified demand to work on, and money will come out on the other side of this at some point. Some goes fast, some goes slower. So for me, that's good, because it's, it takes around, I think, 30 days or something like that for us to, from the first click on a marketing activity until the demo is booked. So I can have like a fairly short learning cycle, set up a test, look at the numbers, and then see whether I'm happy with what I'm seeing there or not. So like in short, I'm looking at marketing qualified leads. Then I look at all of my activities from a normal distribution kind of point of view. So there's some that are significantly good, and then there's stuff that is significantly bad. And in that sense, I'm looking. Let's try to do less of what I can see. You've bought a lot of clicks here. It's not yielded a single demo call. Let's scratch that spend. Let's find those campaigns that where we have a strong indication that it's working, and let's try to push more budget over there. But then the question then becomes that it's not all marketing tactics that are as easily measurable as, clicks on ads. So you need to kind of have two, you can say, different ways of looking at your marketing activities. There's these disciplines which are very quantifiable, and you should have like a cost per acquisition target for those. Do you meet it? Yes or no? Scale if you do, and drop it if you don't. And then there's, if we come back to the ideal customer profile and this kind of thinking of where do they spend their time, where can we get in front of our ideal customers with the right messaging, etc. Then you should start there, and then you should try to measure as like the second line of thinking. An example like that could be, all the social posts we do on LinkedIn. We create content on LinkedIn that is tailored to please a B2B market, not please, but be interesting for a B2B marketer. And as long as we are sure that it's consumed by the B2B marketer, we've actually achieved what we're trying to do. Then as an afterthought, you can try to measure, do people come organically from LinkedIn and book demo calls afterwards? Or do people qualitatively tell us on a demo call, hey, I've been following you guys on LinkedIn for a while and I decided to book a demo. So there's, different tactics depending on what you do and different ways to measure it depending on what you do. I think overall, if you have no proof that what you're doing is working or that it's actually worth your time, then it's not working. So there has to be proof either in terms of quantifiable stuff or qualitative things. If there's a great comment on your marketing activity, take a screenshot, share it with the team so they can see our ideal customer profile just appreciated this or reshared this article, etc. So that's a bit about how I think about it.
I'm gonna ask a couple more questions because I want to get a little bit deeper into this, because I think that the thing that you said that was interesting there was about if you have no proof that something's working, it's probably not working. And the caveat with that, which I think you probably go into now, is how long do you give something before you make that decision?
So because we have our own product, we know how long it typically takes from first activity from an account until it books a demo, or how long it takes from being a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead, and from a sales qualified lead to a one deal. So you should know how long are your average journeys, or average journeys up to a certain point. In direct to consumer, it can be click on an ad, sign up to a newsletter. Maybe that's 5 days. Then it's 5 days. So if your activity is above that average, you should start questioning, why is this above the average? Are we not seeing after a month, we have still not seen any newsletter signups? If that's, the micro conversion, then you should start probably thinking through, okay, is this really working? It's probably not. So you should know the metrics of your typical customer journeys so that you can utilize them when you run experiments in your brands, whether that's going to events, influencer collaborations, clicks on ads, etc.
Yeah, and again, I think it's also not being tied to that to a strategy. You see fluctuations in platform performance. Is this something that you work within your team? So for example, a brand may see amazing performance with Facebook in the first quarter, and then second quarter Facebook starts to drop off. Like, how much are you changing in terms of spend and commitment to each platform?
This year, for example, what has happened to me last year I spent the most money on Google search ads. But that was before I became aware about how nice LinkedIn ads is when you're a B2B company. So it's shifted. In the past, I've been very successful with Facebook ads for a B2B company. But, that was also in the honeymoon days of Facebook, where there's superior tracking, low competition, etc. So that's like 5-6 years ago now. So I think in general, and this is like a hard-earned lesson, has been that whenever something works for you, no matter the channel, make sure to go all in, double, triple, quadruple your spend while you can see that it's working, because it's not gonna work forever. It's just the life of marketing. We can't shut up. We tell each other this is working amazingly. People shift their budgets over to it. Then it works like an auction. Prices go up. Competition gets harder and harder. And at some point, it doesn't work anymore. So in general, I constantly follow what's working and try to push more budget in there until it stops working. And by me, working means that, have an idea about how much money do I put in and how much money do I yield in revenue afterwards.
Yeah, and how much are you looking ahead for those platforms to become less effective? I think this is something internally we talk a lot with our team about, is that the best time to test new platforms and new projects is before you need them. So for example, we always have this mentality internally of testing something. Even when we're in peak scale mode, we want to take some of that budget to test, because the day is going to come, like you said, where something stops working. And that's the worst position to be like, now what?
Yeah.
How much are you looking ahead?
Not that much, to be honest. But it can also be just, diversifying the strategy within one platform, I would say. Nowadays you have Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. Some might say TikTok or Twitter as well. But there's kind of these, let's say, 5 very well-defined medias nowadays. And I think they're not going away anytime soon. So I think it's more like, make sure to constantly test stuff if you can on a lot of places, but also be aware about that. The game is about finding something that works, and then putting more budget into that, because what works is gonna be the thing that is gonna fuel all the other experiments that you have to keep doing, because at some day that really well running experiment is gonna stop working. So I think it's a constant cat and mouse game, this marketing, where you have to put a lot of eggs in one basket that is working, and then you also need to kind of continuously try to put an egg here and there to have something for the future as well.
And I don't know if it's a silly question to ask you what you're using for measurement, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. You're using your own tool, I'm guessing.
So I'm basically only using our own tool. But there are, and that is because none of the platforms are intended for B2B usage. That's just end of story. They're built to understand what is individuals doing. But if I'm trying to understand how many new businesses became an MQL, they have no chance of understanding that. So if you're in B2B, you need to have an account-based analytics solution set up for you. What I do sometimes look at on the individual platform, particularly when I'm testing new stuff out, is this is might seem contradictory, but just looking at engagement rate, because I'm looking for the earliest indication of whether this makes sense or not. And so, for example, I just started running some memes that we've created against some completely cold companies that we've not been advertising before. And there I'm looking at the engagement rate with the individual ads that I've made. And luckily right now they seem super good. But I also know that from when they click this ad, there's an average of 200 days before we win the account. So that's why I need a very early indication of that the content, the messaging, the creative is somewhat right for this audience.
And can you tell me a little bit more, because we have quite a mixed listenership to the podcast. We're going to have the brands that are loving the information about how you're approaching, your thought process on attribution, but we also have a lot of marketing agencies listening, and they're all putting their own channels together. And a tool like Dreamdata might be, a great product for a marketing agency that's trying to nurture their own marketing efforts. Can you give us a little bit more information about the product, how it works, and how B2B and agencies could benefit from using it?
Yeah, so we do get quite a big bulk of agencies every month coming in, both because they want to service their own customers, but they also want to have better insights into their own marketing activities. Essentially, Dreamdata is you can call it a go-to-market data platform for B2B companies. And what I mean by that is that we want to take anything that touches your customer journeys and extract it out of the silo that it lives within today, and then put it into our data platform and make nice, clean customer journeys out of that data. So in B2B companies, there's typically a CRM system, customer success tool, a marketing automation tool, you have your websites, there's ad platforms, etc. But all of it is essentially silos. So what we extract the data out of all of these, and then people can actually see how are their customers behaving and progressing down through the funnel inside of Dreamdata. And what you use that information for is, simply put, to try to replicate the stuff that you can see is typically present when you win deals. And if you have a bulk of activities that are never producing sales pipeline or revenue, you probably don't want to continue to run these ads, because we're, at least how I perceive marketing, we're doing marketing to produce more money for our company. Otherwise, we're wasting our own time and our company's money. So we want to see which activities impacts money, and we want to do more of those activities that does this.
And how is the product? How do brands interact with the product? So is it UTM based tracking? What's the kind of setup with it?
So we have basically built an application that people can use to do the analysis within. And we've also, so you can think about Dreamdata as doing refinement of data. And then the outcome is basically available in a data warehouse. This data warehouse we've built an application on top of for all us who cannot write code. We have built an easy to use application where you can do the most typical marketing analysis on top of. But the refined data is actually open and available for our paying customers to use their own BI tool or query it directly as well.
Okay, and would this kind of product work for, say you've got a D2C brand that's selling, I don't know, like luxury? Would it work with Dreamdata in terms of measuring the effectiveness of your marketing efforts?
No, probably not too good because our data model, and sorry for being a little bit technical, is account-based. So that means we're trying to group individuals together under one account to understand their timeline.
Okay.
We do but a user in our data model can be one user that has multiple emails. It can have multiple devices. And these things, we kind of build a user and device graph over time. So we know you came to our website this day from a mobile phone, the next day you come from a computer. I think direct-to-consumer companies, there's a Danish product called Costimi, which I think is a bit of the same for e-commerce, although I'm not an expert. But it's basically a customer data platform which also records everything customers are doing over time and hopefully can tell you how you should be doing in the future.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest blocks with any company in terms of their marketing is mentality towards attribution. The problem at the moment is a lot of people only judge their marketing efforts by what they can see, for example, in a platform. So it's usually driven by either what had the last contribution, and that's where they like to put their money. So we see a lot of cases where brands and marketers are putting a lot of money or probably overspending on, say, Google ads or maybe on Facebook ads. How do you get people to look beyond that and say that's just almost like the nudge over the line, but the actual thing that's driving the change in your business is, for example, I don't know, organic TikTok or another channel?
It's a good question, and I'm obviously not a super expert on this, but I think most buying decisions doesn't happen overnight. So with that line of thinking, you need to kind of try to shape the potential buyers of your product before that they start the Google search, because when they start the Google search, if it's not too late, then it's at least very late in that decision-making journey. Like even when I was at my last company, it worked a bit like this: buy traffic from somewhere and then retargeted everything we could afterwards, because nobody is buying anything expensive the first time that they see it. You need to continuously massage the message in. So you need to think a bit more holistically about how ad platform or ads work. You need to plant the seeds among a lot of people, and then some of these seeds will prosper into flowers and trees, etc. So you cannot, it's true as you say, Andy, that you cannot judge your ad spend the minute you spend that money. It needs to kind of be a more coherent process of we plant seeds and then we harvest these seeds as well. At the end of the day, it's the most important thing is that you spend this money on the right people. Like make sure that you get in front of the right people. I would say would be my number one thinking. And hopefully if it's the right people, then you will also see your revenue going up over time. last point would be to go through all your activities and make sure it actually leaves behind digital traces whenever possible. Because when you want to make that analysis, it's too late to think about, oh, I should have actually made sure that this gave a digital reflection so we can do an analysis.
Would you advise, I think sometimes brands look to really, they want to know the exact campaign and the exact ad that's working. And sometimes that information's not possible. For example, if a brand is increasing budget, would you recommend increasing across channels, or would you go specific to a channel?
And obviously this is a case by case challenge, I would say. So I've just been looking at increasing our ad spend. We should spend money where it makes sense. And like, for example, on Google search ads, I could only find a few places where I wanted to spend more. And then on Facebook, we're only doing retargeting. So there's a limit to how much I can spend there. Whereas on LinkedIn, I have these nice lists of matched audiences, so I can spend more. It's very hard for me to say, and my point of view is spend where you make the most out of it, and where I'm kind of platform agnostic from there.
Yeah, and I think that's where the challenge comes up, is that if you can't identify exactly what is driving that growth, sometimes it's not a bad idea to either run channel-focused lift studies, or if you don't have the time to get that technical, instead of thinking, how do I change an ROI of 3 on Facebook to a 3.2, instead you might be better to say, do you know what, we'll just increase all of our marketing spend 10% and let's see the impact of that over 30, 60, 90 days. And are we better off? Has the business increased revenue in that period, or has it not?
I would be a bit like, again, I would think a little bit like normal distribution. If you have some clear winners and you can see there's room for adding more budget there, that's the first place I would turn my attention. But if the clear winner is retargeting, then obviously it doesn't start with retargeting. It starts with you starting clicks from somewhere that retargeting then helps harvest afterwards.
To finish off, I'd love to get your opinion on, where do you see the future of marketing? We've got all of this, a big push on privacy, and we're living that at the moment. There's a tendency towards modeled attribution within platform. Like, what do you think the future looks like? How are we going to be buying our media? How are we going to be judging the performance in the future?
I think there will be, first of all, a huge increase in focus on owning your own data overall. So we come from a world where we were used to being able to, or at least we trusted Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, etc. with having the data and telling us the truth. Now, because different kind of circumstances is making life harder for the advertisers to know what's going on, the responsibility moves over to us. And what I mean by that is that these customer data platforms, solutions that helps you understand what takes place on the entities that you own, will just explode from here. A customer data platform sits on your website looking at where does the traffic come from and what does it become afterwards. The ad platform is sitting on the outside, trying to look outside in and see what becomes of it. And that is what's getting punished. So I'm actually not too afraid. It just takes some technical savviness to set up these customer data platform that monitors, oh, this was this ad from Facebook that is working. Now we record this and then we send the information back into the system. Whereas like in those crazy tracking days, they could kind of look all the way through and just feed their own ecosystem. So nowadays we need to ensure that, our web analytics is just not residing at Google Analytics. We need to own it, and then we can do our own analysis of it, and then we can send the data back into other systems again. Whereas back in the day, we were just saying Google Analytics handles our tracking data. We don't know where it's stored. We don't know if the reports are true or not. And I think that thing will continue to evolve. Actually, from a tracking perspective, I'm not seeing that many challenges for the really data savvy companies, but for the general consumer, there will be some years where it's very hard, which I'm sure you see every day, Andy, that if they don't have a too technical setup, then tracking has become harder.
Yeah, and I think we've probably completed quite a nice loop there, going back to the very, very first question on how do brands adopt to new marketing and new approaches to marketing, which is, maximizing control of first-party data. Get yourself a CDP set up and start to look at, how you're operating with that. Don't be naive and don't rely on platform-specific attribution. And I think it's about adapting mentally our mindset that maybe the information that we've had previously, although it felt amazing, maybe it wasn't as accurate as we thought, and now we're trying to move towards that new accurate. Steffen,
I think everybody has experience looking at Facebook reporting something, and then you'll open Google Analytics and then it says something completely different. Well, that's maybe they're both publicly listed companies and have their incentives to shape the analytics in a certain direction.
Yeah, and they make it so hard. The data that you get out of Facebook, then you look in Google Analytics, and if you're a D2C brand and you're using Shopify, the sales revenue that comes through in Shopify is completely different to what Facebook is reporting, and it's posing a massive challenge. But Steffen, thank you so much for your contribution. I've been such a big fan of the content that you and the team have been putting out, and I think that not only fellow marketers but also brands, if they want to look at how to embrace organic, and it doesn't necessarily need to be take your D2C brand onto LinkedIn, but having members actively involved in marketing the company on relevant platforms, I think is a huge lesson people can learn. If people want to follow you and maybe try to scope out your strategy like I did, where can they find you? And also, who else in the company should they be looking at?
So we're spend 80-90% of our time on LinkedIn, so it's definitely there you want to check out Dreamdata. Then everybody on our team is quite active on LinkedIn, but I think the most active ones might be me and Laura and Sam. It's probably two or three good advices, but any team member is basically pretty active on LinkedIn trying to create more demand for us.
Yeah, and if people have questions, feel free to reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to reply any question you might have.
Amazing. I've loved kind of getting an insight. And I think one thing that's really struck me with this is whenever I've asked a question, you've always asked for a better question. So to be more specific, and I think that's a great lesson with attribution as well, is get specific in the information that you want to receive. And then once you've got that, you can then respond to it. Steffen, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. I hope it was useful.